Our worthy forefathers, let's give them a cheer. To climates unknown did courageously steer. Through oceans to deserts for freedom they came, and dying bequeathed us their freedom and fame. In freedom we're born, and in freedom we live. Our purses are ready, steady, friends, steady. Not as slaves, but as free men, our money.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another program of the Historical Society of Old Abington. This is being taped as our December program, though through the luxury of video, we can kind of tape it when we need to tape it, and we sometimes do it in segments, but we're here today to talk about the St. Mark's Joy in Christ Lutheran Church. I'm going to open today's program as we open all of our programs, and that is with a salute to the flag. So if you would kindly join me from your homes, if you would care to. And there's a flag right here behind our first guest. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I am struggling over indivisible lately. Last time I did it, I said individual, and okay, whatever. I'll get it right by our next taping, I promise. Before I introduce our guests today, I want to talk a little bit about programs we have recently done and programs that we have upcoming. Traditionally, when we're not dealing with COVID, we meet the first Sunday of each month for 3 months in the fall, October, November, December, and we call that our fall semester, and then we meet again in the spring for March, April, and May. The programs that we have completed to date and that you can find on YouTube and sometimes on local cable, back in October we started out with The Business of Dying, which sounds interesting. It was interesting. It was about local funeral homes, and we had the opportunity to meet with a couple of funeral directors and talk about how the traditions came about and how they changed over the years. In November, our program was on the GAR halls, the Grand Army of the Republic halls. There's a neat tie-in because as we're talking about the Lutheran Church today, it actually started, it was originally formed at the GAR Hall in Whitman, and we have pictures of that actually I took from the last presentation. And today we're talking about St. Mark's Lutheran. It was formed as St. Mark's Lutheran, but more recently known as Joy in Christ Lutheran Church here in Abington. We'll take the break, as I said, and coming up in the spring, we're going to be talking about the beginning of March, the Spanish flu. The program is called Deja Vu All Over Again. The parallels between then and now are kind of frightening. We should learn from past mistakes. And then in April, we're going to be talking about law and order, policing in the Old Town. And I'm likely to have a police chief as a guest, but all three towns have relatively new facilities. And how we got to that and how the history of policing in the Old Town is a topic worth exploring, so that should be interesting. And then we'll finish up our spring semester with a program on new acquisitions at the Historical Society of Old Abington and here in our host facility at the Dyer Memorial Library. Amazing things come through the door all the time, and we don't really have the opportunity to inform you about what we have and talk about what's here. And so every now and then we like to devote a program to talking about particular new pieces in the collection and new things that are happening here at the Dyer Memorial Library and Archives. So that's the syllabus, if you will, for this past semester and for what's coming up next. I have here as my guest today, Jeff Stone, and you've had a lot of titles. Today we'll call you the President and Treasurer of St. Mark's Lutheran Church.
Soon to be X.
Soon to be X. Well, and I guess that's something we need to talk about is this program is coming up as the church has formally closed as Joy in Christ Lutheran Church and is imminently on the verge of being sold. And I mean, when I say imminently, we're talking maybe today.
Today.
Today, okay. So your cell phone is nearby, and if it rings, we will interrupt, if need be. But anyway, it's an appropriate time to look back, and I don't want to make it a mournful time to look back. It's a rich history. A lot of Abingtonians and Whitman people and Rockland people who we represent have worshipped there and been part of it or attended programs there. But the history of it goes back quite a ways. About 1956, the first worship service was at the GAR Hall in Whitman. Now, Jeff, I think 56 is an important year because a lot of churches in this area were making changes in 1956. We hadn't seen much in the way of new church construction like this. Prior to then, I mean, I can think of the Baptist church built in the 1880s, and maybe about the same time the Catholic Church built St. Nicholas over in West Abington. But I always see this as a response to GIs returning from the war and needing a place to worship. Does that scenario kind of fit in with what happened?
I think it does a little bit. In 1956, I wasn't quite born yet, so I can't.
Not long after that, though.
Not long after that. But
you were born into the church, basically.
I was, and it all started as a result of the big Lutheran church here was First Lutheran in Brockton, and for people back then, it was just too far to drive, and so a lot of families, mostly of Scandinavian German descent, that were either recently off the boat or one generation removed from coming to the United States, wanted to build a local church, Lutheran, since that's what they were when they were over in Scandinavia and Germany. And a bunch of families got together, organized at the GAR Hall, and worked with the local Lutheran church to, the local meaning the arm of the Lutheran church, who are looking to put a new church somewhere on the South Shore.
Right.
So Abington, I guess, was as good a spot as any, and was 6 or 8 families originally got together and came up with the idea was a couple of years in the making. It officially organized in June of 1957, and the church was built in 1960.
You're better at dates than you think you are. The groundbreaking, yes, was 1960 with the first service in the new church of 61. Relative to what you're saying in terms of looking for a place, I had the pleasure earlier chatting briefly with Beverly Schmidt up at Brooksby Village, but she and her husband Henry and their young family came to Abington about 1959, actually, and were early adopters of the new church. Henry Schmidt was brought up Lutheran, his wife was not. She converted when they were in the military out in California. And when they came here, they were looking for a church, and they were looking for a Lutheran church. And they found what was originally incorporated as St. Mark's. Is there any magic behind that name? I know it got confused a lot. It must be a Catholic church because it's a saint name or something.
No, it started off as St. Mark Evangelical Lutheran Church.
Okay.
And back in the, I don't remember if it was the late 80s or 90s, we hit some speed bumps. The church hit some speed bumps and just kind of rebranded itself, really. Just kind of looked for, the congregation size had dwindled after many years of growth, and I think the church council just wanted to put a different name on the face of the church and market itself a little bit different to the public. Okay.
Well, let's take a look at the church history a little bit on screen here, and I think it's going to evoke some more conversations. The image on screen right now is the GAR Hall in Whitman, where the first service was held on October 14th of 1956. I have a wonderful cheat sheet here. The church kept excellent records, and I was able to just open up a book and Xerox this off. Organization Sunday was June 2nd of 1957, again at the GAR Hall. But it wasn't long, indeed 1960, as we were just saying, for the groundbreaking of the new church. This building shouldn't look familiar to many of you because, unfortunately, well, let me do this one first. This is actually a photograph from the church records of one of the early services in the GAR hall. This would have been held on the first floor. There's a tin ceiling up above, but this is the congregation in a makeshift setting at the church, at the hall, which they were using as a church. They built a new building, and then by the 1970s, the GAR hall in Whitman burned down to the ground. It's now actually the site of the Whitman Seniors Center, if that means anything, on, not Park Ave, I forget which street this is. Does it say? I should know, I'm sorry. But anyway, so it burned to the ground and pieces were salvaged, but that was the end of that building. It did not get rebuilt as anything other than a senior center. But this is what was envisioned for St. Mark's, a very contemporary design. There were contemporary designs happening in church construction at the time. The Lutheran Church in Hanover, Church of the Cross, I think it's called, that has a very contemporary design as well, and I know that same architect did the Episcopal Church in Rockland, across from Rockland High School on Goddard Ave. So again, post-World War II, there was a new wave, there was a new image of what a church should look like, and this is what was designed. I loved the spire. Unfortunately, the spire never got built, but this is a wonderful first early example of early view of the church. This is from a postcard, again from the church's files, which let me right now say thank you, because the church records and files have been turned over to the Dyer Memorial Library and Archive and are being preserved here. So anyone who's looking for the records, they are now here. Anyone who wants to add memories to our files, personal memories about their time at the church, we would welcome them. We would welcome any personal stories that tie into St. Mark's or Joy in Christ. It looks a lot like the sketch. I mean, it really does. And this is the church as you first knew it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Before the bushes and flowers and everything else were
before they all grew in.
Yep.
So this is quite early. And we were just talking about sidewalk, which suddenly isn't there anymore, but it was here once upon a time. So somewhere along the line of rebuilding Route 18, things changed. And Jeff and I walked through the church probably about a month ago, and I grabbed some photographs for our collection. This is in the narthex looking into the sanctuary. And now we're into the sanctuary. Now the pews and finishes were done by parishioners, if I remember correctly. You knew who made the pews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Charlie Ward.
Charlie Ward made them? Okay.
He ran a construction company back in the day, and
Okay.
it was from Summit Road, and he belonged to the church. Actually, his wife was a Lutheran, and Charlie donated all those pews to the church back in late 60s, early 70s.
Okay, so before then it was portable chairs, and much as they used at the GAR hall until the pews came in. It's a labor of love and an intense labor because there's a lot of them. This is a panoramic shot taken from about the same area. To the far left are the stairs taking you to the hall downstairs, and that box to the side is something I would call a sacristy. It's where the robes were stored and vestments of the church and altar paraphernalia and whatever. And this has changed from the original, and to the right, there's in this picture a pipe organ, but originally it was pews and a piano, as I recall from the early days of the church.
The choir loft.
That was the choir area. Cool. Again, very contemporary. A lot of exposed wood, a lot of glass. Center focus to the altar. Do you remember how many it accommodated at all? I never had a count.
Well, the permit says 110.
Okay.
We've had more than that up there with chairs in the middle and on the side. But,
okay. Are we talking Easter and Christmas? And
special occasions.
Okay. Absolutely.
Some couple big funerals that we had there where we had overflow.
Absolutely. Being a musician and being an organist, of course, the organ certainly grabbed my attention. Now, this was a later edition.
Correct. It was actually donated by another church who was, quote, going out of business.
Okay.
And they sent out a note to local area churches to see if anybody wanted the pipe organ, and I guess we raised our hand first, and they gave it to us for free. We just had to install it and have it
which
tuned up.
Which isn't necessarily cheap, but
No.
it was a great addition, and I had a chance to play it. Jeff was kind enough to shoot a video while I was hacking away at the keys there for a bit, so perhaps if we have time or space, we'll sneak it into this video. And I reached out to the Pipe Organ Historic Society, and they keep track of pipe organs, and have attempted to get this into their database. It's a Wicks organ from Highland, Illinois, from I think it's 1968. Small but very effective. To date, there are only 2 pipe organs, I believe, in Abington. United Church of Christ has one, and the Lutheran Church has had one, and that's it. The rest are gone, replaced by electronics for those who still use organs. But anyway, and then downstairs was the original social hall for the church. I actually have memories of this from a Cub Scout meeting from way back, and of course I was small at the time and the hall seemed huge, but in reality it wasn't. It was fairly modest in scale. But a lot happened here. In fact, there was a nursery school that was run here for many years.
About 10 or 12 years.
Okay, so I mean, it functioned in the community beyond that. So, and I think the church adapted the hall and added an office or something to help accommodate that. So that's great, but very typical construction of the time, the lally columns holding up the beams, holding up the floor, and all the space in between. Now, talking about the size, we just talked about the limits of the sanctuary and the limits of the hall. At some point, the church decided to put on an addition, and I know you were very involved in that. Can you talk a little bit about the process that led up to it?
Sure. We had a younger pastor that had a tremendous amount of energy, and that energy, along with the Holy Spirit, just drew families into the church. And we had to use the upstairs for Sunday school classes. At one point in time, we were doing a 7 o'clock worship service and 2 later services.
Wow.
And it was impacting worship services because we were doing Sunday school upstairs. So we needed a, quote, Sunday school wing so we could move everything over, just out of the up and down space on the original building. So we built this addition in the mid-'80s.
Okay. And you got a lot of space out of it. It was basically a lower level,
Correct.
And so it was on the same level as the old, what I'm calling a social hall, but the hall under the main sanctuary. In fact, we're seeing here in this, there are some pews there which I believe were removed from the choir area.
Correct.
When the pipe organ went in, and so here they were reused. We're good Yankees; we never throw anything out.
Right.
And there they are here in the social hall. We have a few more images from the inside of the church. In the process of doing this, also a new rear entrance to the church was created, and we're looking from the new hall down the corridor by an office, by a kitchen, into the old hall, and the entrance from the parking lot's to the right-hand side. And the final shot of the interior of the church, forward thinking, there is a wheelchair lift here, and this is a stair from the lower level to the upper level, and that upper door is right next to the pipe organ. And so it brings you actually in the opposite side of the sanctuary from the old stairway. So there were 2 ways to get up and down at that point, and that worked out beautifully. And the final image I have to share that we can keep up as we talk more about the church is this is the view from Route 18, Bedford Street, as we look at the church. This was taken just last week. So it's as up to date as we get. Probably the appropriate time to talk more about the sale. At some point it was determined that the congregation could not sustain this particular home, I guess is the right way to put it, and at some point it was decided to sell the church. And what surprised me, and I guess kind of pleased me, is that it's being sold lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, everything goes. Is that
Everything.
right? Everything goes.
Turnkey.
You get the pews, you get the organ, you get the office computer. I mean, you get everything. I mean, that's cool. I mean, in that someone coming in the door can walk in the door and start having services there.
Well, just, we had interest by a bunch of churches, and a restaurant group and a couple of other spaces. But
Interesting.
it's a church.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the best use is for another church to come in and to walk in, and as you mentioned, it's turnkey.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have to buy a hymnal. They don't have to.
Well, they might.
They might,
The Lutheran hymnal's Lutheran.
right? But they don't have to.
No, they don't have to. You're right. They can make do. So, anything stick out about, you've kind of referenced the fact that through different pastors, different focuses, different energy levels, different things have happened throughout the years. Certainly that influenced the membership and the growth and something else. And another thing you had said in a previous conversation, something that I think made it difficult to keep a cohesive congregation is not all of the congregation came from Abington.
No, and it never did. I think that's one of the difficulties that this particular church had. Most churches in a community, half the population, 75% of it, come from that
town. Yeah.
Even at its peak, I don't think we ever had more than 7 or 8 families from the town of Abington.
Okay.
They came from today, or prior to closing, Scituate, Middleborough, Easton. Those are long distances to travel to church.
And of course, as you mentioned, the church was somewhat formed because no one wanted to go to Brockton.
Right.
But now they were coming in from greater distances than that to attend this church. And
I think that one of the churches in America, especially on the coasts, they're all suffering the same thing. The population of the congregation is aging.
Mm-hmm.
The average age of our congregation was about 75 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The young kids are not coming to church. Doesn't mean that they're not religious or they don't believe in God or Jesus Christ, but they don't come to church.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need a certain amount of people to
Right.
to run a nonprofit organization and financially and just holistically
Right.
with people to do the work of the church. You just get to be that size where couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, that's always been an awkward growth thing. I have been involved in other churches where suddenly they were attracting younger families with younger children, which always looks good, but quickly I discovered that oftentimes younger families with children have neither time nor money. And to keep a church going, it requires both.
That's right.
And so you need that mix of congregation to pull that off. So I mean, you're right. The fate that your church has faced is not unusual. There's also a lot more, I don't know, demands for, but certainly potential focuses for attention. I mean, when I was growing up in this town, and I'm sure the same with you, there were no kids' sports on Sunday morning. No way. I mean, there were no soccer games or baseball games. Nothing. Sunday morning was for church, and we crossed that somewhere along the line.
That's right.
And I think, personally speaking, I think that hurt churches quite a bit. And also churches, and I was asking Bev Schmidt about this, and I'm going to talk to Leanne, I think, a little more about it too when I have her sit down in your chair for a chat. Churches are often the social hub of a community, and when there are other draws there on people's attention, they lose that. And once you're not going to the church for suppers and other extracurricular activities, it just loses its focus.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that's happened here too. So you've been shepherding the church through the closure. Takes a lot of organization, takes a lot of time. Anything in particular stand out about that process to you? Frustrations or surprises or whatever as things are winding down?
No, I think that for it's sad, it's sad for both Leanne and I, who are, both of our parents were part of the founding families of the congregation. Mm-hmm. It's where we've learned our faith. We've got tremendous friends still that were part of this community with us. For my wife and I, mm-hmm. My mom and dad, raised us here. Our kids were baptized. Our grandkids were baptized. We were married by the pastors. That were or kids were baptized by pastors in the church. So yeah, that's tough. And I think for the congregation, the toughest thing is the breakup of the community. You know, especially we're going to do all these things this summer to try to stay connected and get together at houses and have cookouts, and can't do any of that stuff
No,
in,
COVID.
in
No.
the COVID world. So,
No.
so I think it's probably even been harder for people because it was, we had a final worship service in June in the parking lot,
Yep.
socially distanced,
Yeah.
and there was no ability. That was it. There's no ability to catch up with people, real time, face to face. I mean, you can email them and talk to them on the phone, but it's different than when you're used to seeing people,
Right.
every Sunday.
Exactly.
So in your community, it's, as you mentioned, it's community.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. I mean, as you're saying these words, it reminds me of the stories I hear of folks who contract COVID and they're isolated in the hospital and their families can't say goodbye to them. I mean, it's a different form of a death that it's kind of ripped away from you at that point. So
absolutely.
How do you feel about the sale and another church coming in and using, does that give you a good feeling about the way things are turning out?
Yeah, I can imagine if we sold it to the restaurant group, for example, that
Right.
was considering it. It's a church. Our parents built it to be, to be church of, a place to go worship God. I'm thrilled that, I think we're all thrilled that it's going, that another church is going to come in and, and worship there, and
Okay.
hopefully, it'll thrive under, a different,
Under
different
new
moniker.
management.
Yeah, under new management, exactly.
And I guess I can dare mention on tape that the sale is potentially going through for the Church of Christ in Milton.
Correct.
And but I was first under the impression that this was going to be a branch of or a sister congregation of, but they are actually relocating from Milton, as we understand.
So that church is going to be here, whether it's a second church or or they're just wholesale relocating. I understand that they have a lot of parishioners, from the area, so it made sense for them to have a church here. So I just don't know the answer to, is it a second church or is it or is it they just relocating the whole thing?
Well, perhaps by the time we are ready to go to video release, I may try to reach out and learn more, assuming the sales happen by that time, or assuming the sale might happen today. Anyway, well, listen, I can't thank you enough for coming in to chat with us about your perspective on this and your history with the church. Of course, we have someone else from the church today who has been with it pretty much from the start, and I'm going to ask her perspective as well. So I'm going to take a small break in the taping and say goodbye to Jeff and thank you, and we're going to invite Leanne to join us. And welcome back. Now we're going to be joined by Leanne Trigler. Thank you for joining us today. Now, I still stumble over that because, of course, I've known you since high school, and you were at the time Leanne Olson.
Yes.
And you were in my older brother's class. Oh, I shouldn't say that, but whatever. You were in my brother's class. How about that? We'll leave it at that. And you married a classmate.
Yes.
Tony Trigler.
Yes.
Anton Trigler, but Tony Trigler. Very good. And as I'm saying that, I realized I didn't mention that when Jeff Stone was sitting in that chair, Jeff is one of my younger brother's closest friends. This is all of a sudden feeling very, very familial here because I know you guys. So growing up in this town. Now, could you share with us some notion about growing up in the church? You were certainly an early member. Your parents, I'm assuming, brought you at first. And who was the Lutheran, and were they both? Or just give us some background, if you would.
Sure. So my father, his family came from Sweden. And yeah. And then when my mother was, they got married in the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
Her family was Baptist, and she then changed over to Lutheran when they got married.
Okay.
And they were because my dad went to the First Lutheran Church in Brockton, and so that's when she became Lutheran.
Okay, so they were worshiping at the Brockton Church, and when something closer to home came up,
So I remember going to the Lutheran Church in Brockton, and having my aunt was the organist
Oh,
there,
wow. Okay.
choir director. And I mean, I was in preschool, I think, at the time, but that's where I started my faith journey.
Okay, excellent. And they weren't worshiping in the GAR hall. They actually first came to this church building.
No, then we came to the GAR
Oh,
building.
okay. Was that early?
So we left Brockton
Okay.
and then came over here, and I think I was about 5 years old when we went.
Don't tell your age.
When I
no one
went-
could guess anyway, but don't do it.
When I went to the GAR hall, which was so much fun because they had these like this, but really old chairs, and we used to sit at the back, my girlfriend and I, and hide pennies in the chairs during the sermon.
I see.
And so that was kind of the beginning there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were then new to the new church at this. I mean, you were.
I was a charter
among
member.
the first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Nice.
Yes.
Excellent. And were there youth programs at the time? I mean, were you involved in those from the very
Yes,
start?
they were Luther League. It was called Luther League at the time. And
Luther League?
Luther League.
Okay, that's tough to get out.
Luther League. And we used to, do ski trips, meet at the church. We'd go up camping up at Lake Ossipee to
nice.
a Lutheran church up there, and so it was a community where the people all like probably from 7th grade through high school would get together.
Now, Jeff talked about the notion that a lot of the churches, a lot of the members, a lot of the parishioners weren't necessarily from Abington. So
Right.
did that mean your friends from the church also were not necessarily from Abington?
They were not from Abington.
Okay.
But what was important was that you develop a sense of community. And
Right.
so that was why the church was built. We moved from the first Lutheran church in Brockton because, like Jeff said, it was
Too far.
Too far
Way-
to go.
way too far to go.
Way too far.
Can't do that.
And so when we came here, that was the holding part, like to gather together and to meet. And so, to make the effort to develop community and hold the space for the future of the church.
Okay. Lifelong friendships? I mean, people that, or has the distance made that hard?
Well, Jeffrey and his wife are lifelong friends. I got some people from different towns that we're still connected to that met at the church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Now, as you became an adult in the church, you also led programs, I believe, in the church as well. Did you not?
Yeah. So, probably in the late 1990s,
Okay.
I started a yoga program there, which was the longest standing. We used to meet Monday nights. It was Monday nights at the church, 7 o'clock. From that year, right up until COVID came in, and then
Wow.
Wow. So it was every Monday night, and some of the people came that whole time.
Wow,
So
that's great.
It started at $3.
Okay.
And then we jacked it up to $5.
I don't know how anyone could possibly afford that. God, when I think of what a gym membership costs nowadays,
Yeah.
and you get all sorts of good stuff out of that. That's excellent to hear that the program is running. Now, you've kept that program running, though, at your other facility, have you not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Please give it a plug.
Okay. So it's the Whitman Wellness Center
Okay.
in Whitman.
Where's that located?
It's in Whitman on Marble Street.
Marble
We've
Street.
been there since, for 10 years. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary.
Now, is
this-
that the old Commonwealth Shoe Building?
Yes, it is.
This is now
Yeah.
condos and businesses. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So some of our people will know it as Commonwealth Shoe, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Marble Street might not ring a bell.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
excellent. So that's ongoing.
Yes. And we actually had a church, when we first opened, there was a church that used to come in and they would, we had a cafe in there and they would worship in our cafe.
Wow. That's great.
Cool.
They'll settle anywhere they can. So
Yeah.
that's exciting. And what are your thoughts in terms of the closure? I mean, how has it left you? How are you dealing with it? Have you found a different place to worship? Have your friends brought you other places?
Yeah.
How is it settling up?
Well, no, haven't found another place to worship
Okay.
yet. because of Corona that
Yeah,
came
that's
in.
true.
It's
Who's open?
really,
Yeah.
you can watch it on Facebook,
Right.
which, different churches. I've been to a couple of different churches,
Mm-hmm.
one in Holbrook, and where our last minister, he preaches there.
Okay.
And then one that Jeff and Candy brought me to down in Marshfield.
Mm-hmm.
And how did it leave me? I think it was a sense of surrender. I just remember I was on the council, and for decades, we have been doing the same thing.
Struggling.
Struggling. And just trying new things, trying different things, and you can never please everybody. Everybody has a different walk in life, and so it's as the congregation got smaller and smaller, then it's harder to please the whole.
Well, and more people wear fewer people wear more hats.
Yeah.
I mean, you end up doing
So
everything.
You start doing a real lot, and I just remember at the council meeting, and Jeff, who's the president, he or the minister, I forget who, actually said that this was their proposition or their presentation, and I just quietly said a prayer, and it just, all right, just give me the strength and give me the peace. And I actually, in those moments, I heard the words, and because that's how I live, and it said, it served us well. And
What a great sentiment.
Yeah,
What a really great sentiment. Yeah. It was there when you needed it for what you needed it for.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it served its purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it's a good time for me to ask what's your wish for the new congregation who'll be taking over the church? Assuming it all goes through.
Well, in the new congregation, I hope it serves them well too, and I'm sure that it will. Yeah, I'm sure that it will.
That's great. That's some good memories moving forward from it. And I'm thrilled that we have this sort of information now in our archives and on tape and everything, that people in future times can look back and understand more what happened and the sort of role that the church played in the community. And are there any parting thoughts that you would like to pass on to future generations about your experience with the church, other than it served us well?
Well, I think that sense of community, and I think right now it's so important that I think we're being challenged through Corona.
Oh, yeah.
Or I always call it Corona, but COVID.
Yeah, that's all
right. And especially where we're separated from one another, to be able to go inside of ourselves and find out what our values are, what each individual values are, as opposed to what this person's, that person's, and then find that sense of sacredness, which is where we all began and where we're all connected.
Do you think part of the lesson that we're dealing with Corona, and this is a leading question, I apologize, is that in the end a church is a building, and the religion and the faith maybe isn't the building, it's something more inside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what has brought me solace is, I could always go to the church, and I did many, many times, and sit by myself or hang out on the altar.
That's cool, yeah.
And that's where I found comfort, but I also find comfort within me. So I knew that as far as my faith, it wasn't going anywhere. My belief system wasn't going anywhere. And it was just a building. Yeah. It is just a building, and it did serve us well.
Good.
And I have to tell you one story, which is a really strange story.
That's all right.
So that was, I think, a Monday night that we had the council meeting, and I wanted to meet with the minister for coffee. I think it was Wednesday. And so it was in Whitman. We were going to meet at a coffee place just to see how he was doing, because he was,
loss for him too,
Of course, it was a loss for him. And on our phones, I don't know if you get this, but sometimes right when you get in the car, it's like they know it. The phone knows where you're going.
Well, mine's ringing now, and I'm going to shut it off.
But sometimes
someone knows where I am, apparently.
you'll look, and it goes, 12 minutes to Joy in Christ Church. Do you ever get that on your phone?
No.
Am I the only one that gets that?
Okay.
Well, anyway, so on this particular day, I got in the car to meet the minister in Whitman.
Okay.
And so I just looked at my phone, and it said 12 minutes to St. Mark's Lutheran Church.
Okay, that's really weird.
Hello, yes it is. And I said, well, there you go. Like, there you go.
12 minutes in what universe?
Well, St. Mark's Lutheran Church, iPhones weren't even out at that time.
Yeah,
like
well, exactly. So
you know,
how would it have that
and
marker?
there it was, and I pulled over wanting to take a picture of it, but I couldn't. Then it was
Save
gone.
screen.
So for me, what I felt was it was the founding 6 families that had started the church. They were just saying, you know what? It was once St. Mark's,
right?
And then it was Joy in Christ, and now it will be something else.
Something else.
Served us
Absolutely. Well, it's a wonderful attitude about it. And, you know, as an architect who has converted churches to other things, I mean, I took the old North Congregational Church and for clients turned it into apartments. And I know something similar was done with the Baptist Church in Whitman. So to see a church have the opportunity to continue on as a church is a blessing in itself.
I think so.
I mean, it really is. You know.
I think that gives a lot of us, I know it gives me comfort to know that the word will still be shared and that there's hope in the unknown, right?
Absolutely. And a whole new generation and a whole new population going to find comfort within the walls.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
You are
This
welcome.
has been very enlightening. I feel like we've added a lot to the historic record here today. And I again want to encourage anyone who has memories of the church, offer them the opportunity to share them. Write us a note here at the Dyer Memorial Library and Archives, Historical Society of Old Abington, on Center Avenue in Abington, and share with us, and we'll add it to the archives here that will be preserved about the church. And history didn't end yesterday. We'll be paying attention to what comes next, to the new congregation that takes over the church, and perhaps chat with them a bit about their hopes for the future to kind of round out the picture. But with that, we're going to end this program of the Historical Society of Old Abington. Do watch. We're going to be publishing a list online on our Facebook page that will list the programs that are available on YouTube. And while you're educating at home and learning at home, you might want to check out a few of our other programs about local history. We've had some fascinating topics like we have had today, and we will do more in the future. So we look forward to hearing from you. We welcome your membership. The Historical Society of Abington is $12 a year to support our programs, or $75 for a lifetime membership. But for now, I'll say see you next time, and thank you for joining us.